The following video walks you through a series of prompts to get you thinking about the impact of stereotypes and introduces you to the common tropes that are often used to characterize Native people. You might start to notice these tropes in everyday life and pop culture. Ultimately, being aware of the stereotypes and tropes that exist is the first step in correcting the narrative about Native people. If you've watched preceding videos in this course, you know that stereotypes about blood quantum, cultural involvement, physical appearance, tribal affiliation, and more exist. And you know that these stereotypes are generally rooted in misunderstandings about Native identity. But there are many more tropes that are just as common and that often pop up in popular culture. Now, stereotypes come in lots of different forms, and it can be helpful to think about these stereotypes using the idea of malevolent and benevolent stereotypes. Now, what are the differences between the two? Well, benevolent stereotypes are usually superficially positive and focus on characteristics that are generally thought of as a strength or a positive attribute. For example, a common benevolent stereotype is the idea that some people are inherently better at math than other people, or that some people are naturally more in touch with nature than others. While these assumptions might not seem offensive on the surface, they are ultimately rooted in inaccuracies that have been used to single out single groups as different or separate from the rest of the community. These stereotypes can also be pretty depersonalizing and can cause negative emotional consequences for those to which the stereotype is applied. Sometimes benevolent stereotypes are at the root of fetishization of certain groups as well, which in turn denies their humanity. Malevolent stereotypes, on the other hand, are those stereotypes that are rooted in beliefs that some people are naturally and inherently inferior to others. These types of stereotypes have been used to justify things like legalized discrimination, violence, and even genocide. Malevolent stereotypes are commonly linked to leadership capacity and are often used as justification for some people and groups holding power over others. Much like the benevolent stereotypes, malevolent stereotypes have a powerful impact on not only the individual to who they are applied, but also in how others interact with the stereotyped individual or group. Many of the tropes and stereotypes of Native people are presented as benevolent and well-meaning. Often, people who rely on benevolent stereotypes can argue that their assumptions about Native people are rooted in some kind of respect for Native culture, although this is usually not the case. Now that we've reviewed the concepts of benevolent and malevolent stereotypes, let's consider the following prompt. What are some benevolent stereotypes about Native people that appear in American culture? Some common benevolent stereotypes are that Native people are victims that should be pitied, that Native people are noble savages, that they are natural warriors, that they are stoic and hold inherent wisdom about the world, that they are mystic, that all Native women are related to Indian princesses, and that Native people are loyal sidekicks. These examples are all benevolent stereotypes because they are linked to aspects of what an outsider might think of as being a good or redeemable quality about Native people. For example, the mystic stereotype suggests that all Native people are somehow supernaturally connected to the environment. Although many Native cultures do have a focus on environmental stewardship, not all Native cultures are the same, and many Native people are not connected to this part of their culture, especially not in any supernatural way. Or the Indian princess stereotype. While people might think that Native people like to be thought of as princesses or royalty or special in some way, this stereotype is rooted in the fetishization of Native women and is connected to the high rates of sex trafficking and violence against Native women by non-Native perpetrators. Now, take a moment to brainstorm some of the more malevolent stereotypes. Some stereotypes you may have listed could be primitive, that Native people are aggressive drunks or addicts, that we are wards of the state that rely on welfare, that Native people are anti-science, or that we are naturally less competent in family building. These are very obviously hurtful stereotypes that most Native people have heard in either their professional or personal lives. To learn about all these stereotypes in more detail, feel free to review them more closely in the Seeing Our Native Students Guide. Using the malevolent and benevolent stereotypes lists that you've come up with, brainstorm where in pop culture or in American culture do you see these stereotypes coming up? As you might have come to realize through this exercise, stereotypes and tropes about Native Americans are everywhere, from our daily conversations, our media, our advertising, and even in our sports culture. Now, where in your workplace might these stereotypes or tropes appear? After you finish discussing or considering the last prompt, consider what impact you think these stereotypes might have on both your Native and non-Native community members.